Okay, in this video here today, we're going to go over different remarketing ad platforms like Crieto, Perfect Audience, Retargeter. There's a few others out there that do pretty much the same thing, which essentially what it allows you to do is put a tracking pixel on your business's website, and then with that, you can have targeted advertising that shows up for the prospects that have been on your site within the last 30, 60, 90, 180 days. Kind of follow them around, if you want to label it that, so that you can get some of those people back and make more productive use of the traffic that you paid to get to your site in the first place, which is what remarketing pretty much is all about. So the general premise of this video is to ask more so, I guess first of all, the objective is to say which one of these is better than the other, but then also with that, there's Google Display Network, which is a competitor, I feel, as a general category all in itself, and that competes directly with some of these other, what I call third-party platforms to do remarketing. I'm going to tell you the differences between those and using GDN as well, and which one you should use, ultimately allowing you to arrive at the general conclusion as to what you should do for your remarketing. Okay? So anyway, I have a short list of things here, as I usually do on my videos, of things to do, things to consider, things to avoid when you're doing your remarketing, and when ultimately, and if you're considering one of these platforms right now, you're on YouTube searching for whether or not you should use it, you should know by the end of this video. So anyway, the first thing on my list here, just wanted to talk about the high-level differences between these different platforms, namely Google Display Network, which you can do through the Google Ads platform, and some of these, what I call, again, third-party remarketing ad platforms. So the first thing on my list here to discuss is the cost. The cost per click on these third-party platforms generally is a little bit, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, quite a bit more expensive than what Google Display Network has. And I attribute that to being, you're going directly to the source. Google, with Google's AdSense program, AdSense, if you don't know what it is the program where if you're a publisher, you own a news website, you basically have a YouTube channel and you're monetizing it through quote-unquote monetization. That's the program which pays you, and with that, they give you some code to put on your site, and then automatically, dynamically have ads show up on your site. With that, it's DoubleClick that is an intermediary between Google, those AdSense ads that show up on basically, out of all the different ads you pretty much see on websites that are not big mainstream sites like Reddit and then Facebook and so on and so forth, the smaller sites, is going to be AdSense. And that AdSense then links directly up to Google Ads. And if you have a Google Ads account, you can then use that Google Ads account through the Google Display Network. They have Google Search Ads, of course, you can advertise on Google through Google Ads. Then Google Display Network, of course, so you can advertise on these sites that host are partnered up with Google AdSense providers, if you will. And so Google obviously owns Google Ads, and they own Google AdSense. You're going directly to the source. There's no middleman, so to say, with Google Ads. Whereas with these other third-party providers, Retargeter, Perfect Audience, and so on and so forth, they don't actually work directly with the publisher. They're just reselling traffic on the out there on the open network, if you will. And so with that, they have to, so there's multiple people that kind of have to have their hands in the till, if you will. It's going to drive up the cost. And so with that, for that reason alone, when my clients ask me about it, I tell them to stay away from it just for that specific reason alone. Because the same traffic can pretty much be gotten on Google Display Network, and because ultimately, with that said, it's hard enough to get a return from display advertising, even if it's remarketing as is, than to have that hindrance standing in front of you as well. So anyway, ease of use. So, with that, in terms of implementation, one thing the reason why people use these is because it's easier. Those ad interfaces. So people say that Google Ads anymore it's a shame because they made it too complicated. These third-party platforms make it easy to do remarketing. And I admit, it is easier, but therefore you're paying a huge premium for that quote-unquote easy use. And if you actually try to just read a few articles about Google Display Network and how to set up remarketing ads, it's really not that hard. Yes, there's a lot of buttons in there inside the Google Ads account, so if you don't know what you're doing, you're just blindly thinking that, oh, I want to be able to go in there in 20 minutes. I want to be able to have it handled and not think about it. By the way, if that's what your attitude is towards your marketing in general, you're never going to be the leader in your market. Focusing on the marketing is the number one most important task you have in your business and function. And at the very least, got to understand it before you can outsource it to somebody. So spend an hour or two figuring out how to use Google Display Network, or assign somebody to figure it out in your company so that you can use it and get that half or more discount on the cost per click you're going to get. You don't have to have it, dummified, if you will, on how to actually do it. The reach. So the reach on Google Display Network is, I would say, definitely quite a bit bigger. I don't have the actual stats on that in terms of how many remarketing ad impressions you can get overall, because it varies by market, from Google Display Network to some of these third-party providers. However, I want to say that it's probably in the range of like 10 times more ad impressions you can get on Google Display Network, specifically because, like I said, Google pretty much owns the market, if you will. 90% of ads are AdSense, runs through AdSense on sites that have that are publishers that have advertising running on them. So with that said, if you have long story short, if you have a offer that works with your marketing ad that works on some of these other platforms, you can go ahead and move it over to Google Display Network and potentially get up to 10 times more results from it, just because of the leverage aspect of what you can do. The next thing on my list here is a targeting capability. So there is a situation, definitely actually, which I'm going to get to here, why you would actually use a third-party platform. And that is, there's more options available to you on specific industries where you can use it. So if you're not in the right industry, you would just never know this, but there's a lot of industries out there where you cannot do Google Display Network remarketing because it's quote unquote restricted. Those are things like in the medical category. In itself, they don't want you, if you have a balding problem, to get to your site and say, then follow people, in terms of like hair growth, and later on say, hey, baldy, come get our product. They want to, because it hurts the general, I guess, well-being and perception of Google. They have a hard enough time the way it is. The same thing with Facebook, by the way. They're kind of have the similar philosophy on this. There's just certain categories they don't want you to retarget on. However, you can get on the same websites a lot of times just by using these third-party platforms, because they're not the ones that are making the deals directly themselves through the programmative ad network out there, but you can still get on these sites without the restrictions. So it's a nice little workaround, if you will, that I found. So basically, and they do have like their own restrictions, and if you can't get it with one, potentially go to the other. But from what I found, you can do remarketing in pretty much any business by figuring out one of these places that will take your business on. You just got to try them out. I use Adroll mostly, so with that, there are most markets a lot of markets you can't get on the Google Display Network. You can now get on Adroll, so maybe try out there first. Some of these other networks, I haven't literally farmed certain things out to see which ones will accept and are generally more accepting. I have, in certain occasions, went to other networks where Adroll would not pick it up. I also just use Adroll because I'm more familiar with the platform in general, instead of just going from platform to platform every time I need to switch and not use Google Display Network. But the other reason, and with that, I'm familiar with Adroll and don't like to switch, is another use of using Adroll or one of these other platforms is the email targeting capability that you can get with the third-party remarketing systems in general, or platforms in general. So what is email targeting? So that's where you would take an email address, presumably of your customer base that you already have, upload it to, you could do this with Google to a degree, through search retargeting, not display retargeting, that you can retarget based upon an email list. You can actually do that through Facebook, but you can also do it if you want more than Facebook and you want to have CNN.com, weather.com, places that pretty much, if your customer base or prospect base is not on social media, you definitely want to do this other remarketing on these other networks. You can do it with some of these third-party platforms. And actually, by the way, just a general asterisk about what I said, if something's working, you want to do remarketing on everything, social media, Facebook, and Google Display Network or one of these other platforms. But specifically with the email targeting, as a general kind of side take to this, what I do is I'll go to a place like Nextmark that sells email lists of other people's customer lists, and you can get customer lists from other indirect competitors, upload them to Adroll, and then now target people that are more likely to be buyers. So it's not just about remarketing. Now that technically is a gray area. You're not technically supposed to do that unless you've gotten permission from the people that you're going to be marketing to, but you know, let's just say I've done it before and I've never had a problem before with that. It's not like emailing people directly, that there's no issues that come up. People are used to seeing advertising. They're not going to question it per se. But take that information with you know, I'm not going to be responsible in terms of the legal aspects of that. You have to research it yourself. I will not go into it. You know, so with that in and itself, you can, and then I know the other reason that you're going to use the emails is if you're in a B2B niche, what you can do is you can find, like let's say you need facility managers to target in companies with industrial manufacturing companies that are certain employee size or up to sell your industrial machines to, let's say. Very specific market. It's not so much catered to mass advertising. What you could do is you could build an email list of all the, and when I say email list, of actual names, or, like Corey at guaranteedppc.com to target, get you a list of 1,000 prospects like that, of their email addresses, and you can upload it to a company like Adroll or one of these other providers that also have that email upload or email audience, custom audience targeting feature. And then you could just have an ad that's just laser targeted just for those people, and then only target those 1,000 people. So it's very inexpensive and very efficient to do. Saying, hey, are you a industrial facilities manager? Click here so you can see how you can save money. And then you just take them to a really good sales page. By the way, that's very effective. And if you're in B2B, a lot of times that's better than Google search ads because it's so highly targeted. But anyway, moving on here, the differences between Google Display Network, other differences between Google Display Network versus these other third-party platforms. The main thing, other than just these targeting features, is the results. I touched on that a little bit earlier, but in general, I just kind of went through my notes and kind of figured out the cost actually per click, if you will, or per impression, if you want to analyze it that way, is about 1/3 of what Google Display Network will be. Of course, I told you you get about 10 times the volume or total potential impressions for a certain audience of people going for Google Display Network. And then with that, you get a little less garbage inventory, if you will. Not going to talk about any specific provider, but when they talk about garbage inventory, you're talking about websites that have no real reoccurring return repeat audience and is basically just made for AdSense websites, but we're talking about third-party platforms or whatever here too. but basically websites that people create that are, some people call them thin affiliates, but are just set up to have fleeting traffic come in. There's no real content there, and they're trying to get you to click on an ad so they can make a quick commission, and that's it. And then they drive junk traffic there, if you will, any way they can get it. Those sites used to be big back in the day. There's less of that now, but there's still tons of it out there. And there's a little, you can find it. People will pay people like in Southeast Asia to come and click on those ads and then do ad click fraud to generate commissions. And with that, a lot of people aren't doing conversion tracking on their sites, so they won't realize that the traffic they're mostly paying for on certain sections or certain websites isn't converting because it's fraud traffic. And then it hurts their overall ROI potential from the campaign and can't get it weeded out. You will get more of that. Google, in and itself, Google Display Network and Google AdSense has very strong anti-fraud features built in within their system because they have obviously the money and the capability to do that, and they've had that for years. Versus these other platforms, they just don't have the money to analyze the patterns between good traffic and bad traffic and all the data points to be able to find which are likely fraud, and not because they don't want to sell you that. Ultimately, they don't want to work with people selling fraud traffic. They more are focused on trying to give people, their advertisers, a good experience so that they'll want to keep advertising. Otherwise, they'll just give up, and then there's not as many people that will ultimately use this program. But with that said, you can find out for yourself. You can set up a Google Analytics account. You can add what are called UTM track parameters, like UTM underscore source equals, and then Adroll, or UTM underscore source equals perfect audience to your URLs that you're advertising on these different platforms. And then in Google Analytics, then, assuming you also have conversion tracking set up or revenue tracking through the e-commerce functionality of Google Analytics, you can find out which actually gets the most leads or sales per visit, and then you can back that out to for the ad spend that you're spending, which is more so what it's about, and find out which one of these are producing the best for you anyway. Which I recommend, despite of everything I said, go ahead and test it out for yourself. Not every market's going to behave the same exact way that I come to the conclusion on here, even though that's mostly, if you don't want to waste your time, just go use GDM stuff yourself. But you can also try these things out in Google Analytics, test it for yourself. I mentioned Google Analytics here because none of the, of course, Adroll, Perfect Audience, they have their own conversion pixels and tracking inside their interfaces themselves on their own platforms. I recommend you not rely on that because the platforms are going to, and even Facebook can be this way, are notorious on, they're not honest, if you will, just put it that way, and they're not accurate. And so, especially if you're trying to look at what the company themselves say that their product is doing for you individually, you're not going to get very accurate results as compared to feeding everything in Google Analytics and then seeing on a traffic by traffic direct, that is as close to an apples to apple comparison as you can get. Google Ads is the, in terms of what you can track inside the native ad interfaces themselves, the most accurate compared to these third-party platforms, as I've noticed. But with that said, also each one has a little bit different capability and what they call cookie tracking to decide whether or not somebody clicked on your ad and purchased. Google Analytics, it allows you to do on a last click basis, and so you have a direct comparison to do it with. You should pick one, of course. You don't want multiple each pixel from each one of these providers are going to slow down your site a little bit, maybe even half a second each one, or even almost a full second for the DNS calls that they have for each one that you have. So don't use multiple. I recommend, and that's also why I recommend just going to Google Display Network, because if you want volume, you could go there so that you can test them out, maybe split test them even, so you don't have 5 of them on your site at once, and then find the one that you're going to use and then stick with it. So I mentioned, the platforms are honest. You try them out in Google Analytics, find out what converts the best for you, and then stick with one provider, use their pixel, and then you pretty much come to the conclusion for yourself whether Google Display Network or one of these individual third-party remarketing ad providers are going to work the best for you. Ultimately, and just to sum it up, if you're lazy like me, it's certain, well, today, because I've seen it, I didn't want to say I'm lazy, but if you were more lazy, just go for Google Display Network, take my word for it. If you are an advanced, a PPC strategist, you really want to just learn some stuff, you could, like I said, test out each one of these individual platforms, and then also just keep in mind, if you can't do GDN for whatever reason, they won't let you. You want to do some advanced audience targeting by email addresses, go ahead and try one of these out, try Adroll, but also if you're going to use Adroll, why not try, and you're stuck with the third-party platforms, try these different ones out, test it out for yourself, measure your results in Google Analytics, so you have an apples-to-apples comparison to find out what works the best for you and makes you the most money. Anyway, I hope you like this video, put some perspective as to why these different third-party remarketing ad platforms exist, what are the differences between them, how does it compare to Google Display Network, which one will work for you, and how to actually test the differences between them, things that you can do on one versus the other, others you can't. I have a lot of other videos like this to talk about money-making PPC strategies on my channel. I try to release a video a day. You should subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Also on GarrettTVPC.com, you can find a money-making strategies PPC blog, which will talk more in depth on certain things that you can do to implement your business right now in terms of PPC alone that will make you money and can build you up a perhaps multi-million-dollar a year ad campaign for yourself using the strategies that I personally use on campaigns today and have used for the last 15 years. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment. I'll try to get back to you and comment on your exact setup that you have in terms of your remarketing in your business.